So we're switching to English now. In a moment, Teun Gautier will be giving some speech to you. He's worked in the publishing industry in Europe and the USA, and was politically active in an assumption that journalism and politics can help in stimulating societal development. Now is important information. In 2014, he became involved with Steve Jobs School Concept. That's a new school in Amsterdam. When I talked to Teun in London at BET, we had a fascinating conversation. I got so much interested in that school that me and Jan, we got invited, went over to Amsterdam to see that school, and it was really fascinating. I sort of thought that, again, it should be fair for you to see what kind of another way of teaching, another way of schooling can be implemented. Teun, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, my Polish is not very good, so I'll have to do it in English. And what a great and always moving pleasure to be amongst so many people that share an interest in bringing education further. And as Marek said, I was involved in journalism and in politics because I felt that journalism and politics are platforms where we can change the world. But of course, education is the most effective and impressive way to change the world. If we can create an education system that educates our new generations, 2 to 5 times better than a traditional system, we make a big difference. And it's interesting to be here and talk about innovation in education. Because we've had technology in our lives for about 20 years, or maybe 10 years in some cases, and every sector has had the revolution through technology, media, science, and everything. There's one sector that has not been revolutionized through technology, and that's education. And we are preparing children. If a child goes to school now, he or she will leave the school system in 2032. So we are effectively preparing our children for their lives in 2032 with a system that is virtually similar to how my great-grandfather was educated. And if you think about innovation, it's really fascinating to know that about 100 years ago, there was a lot of time and energy spent on innovating the steam engine. The steam engine was a great machine and it could do great things, but it was coming towards the end of its life cycle. And yet people spend a lot of energy in trying to innovate the steam engine, whereas of course what turned out that we needed a structurally different system, being the gas engine. So what I'm saying, and some examples that I've heard here, is that there's a tendency to look at innovation in education saying, okay, so we have the traditional system, so we have a classroom, we have 30 children, and we'll be now bringing in technology. But I think you can take it one step further and say, if with today's technology and opportunities we could totally redesign, we take a white sheet of paper and we redesign education, what would it look like? What I'd like to do is to take you through the process that we've done. In the Netherlands, we have about 40 schools that have our system, our formula, and by the end of this year, we'll have about 10 schools in other countries, in Greece, South Africa, Italy, Belgium, and some others, that will also be implementing this concept. Those are existing schools, publicly financed schools, that will move from a more traditional system to this one. And I've shown this picture at a presentation in Sarajevo, and I know that I noticed there was some sort of a shock in the room. Sarajevo has a very traditional system. This is effectively a picture of one of the schools that is using our system, and it's a traditional school, a very old school that moved to our system. So there's nothing weird, but I know it looks as sort of shocking sometimes. I think I have to move. The history is pretty interesting. There's a guy called Maurice de Hond, and he's very well known in the Netherlands. He's been involved with technology for a long time. And he was remarried a couple of years ago and had a little daughter. She's now 5. And from an earlier marriage, he had already 3 sons. So he had, his father went through education, he went through education, and then his sons went through education. And he saw that basically they all went through the same school system. And now he had a little girl who was 2 at the time, or 3, and she was playing on an iPad, and she was, you know, obviously growing up in a different era. So he went to a politician and said, I don't want my child to go to a traditional school. I do not believe in the traditional system anymore, and I don't want her, so what should I do? And the politician said, well, why don't you start your own school? That's possible in the Netherlands. You can, you know, gather a group of people and start your own school. So he said, okay, that's interesting. And he sat down with about 6 people from the education and technology industries and sectors, and they took literally a white sheet of paper. And they said, how will we redesign education if we have the knowledge of today's technological possibilities? So basically, he wanted to start a school for Daphne. That's his daughter. So he wanted to start one school. And then he was on television introducing the idea, and then he got a phone call from a school in the north of the Netherlands that was doing very poorly. It was in a very poor area, a very socially poor area. And they said, could we use your system? So that meant that in 2013, there were 7 schools in the Netherlands starting with this system. And they were, as I said, somewhat poor schools that were not doing very well. We now have 22 schools, and in August we'll have another about 17 or 18 starting, taking over the system. And by the way, last August, so August 2014, the school that Maurice designed for his daughter started, and his daughter's in that school. That's the school that Marek went to. This is really the picture, I think, of my grandfather and my sons. I have 3 sons going to a traditional school. And the question is, now, originally, education was individual because you had rich boys that had a gouvernante, so one teacher that taught the rich boys. And then, which a great idea, the idea was let's educate all children and create a system that allows us to educate all children. And the system was we put 30 children, in many cases in the Netherlands, 30 children of the same age group into a class. And we teach them according to a scheme. So basically, we teach all these children the same thing at the same time in the same form. Now that is interesting if I think we all know, being educators, that each child is different. They learn in a different way, more intuitive. They are somewhat more mature or a little lagging. They might be having trouble at home. They might have a different background amongst each others. All 30 children are different, and yet we're delivering the same information at the same time in the same form, which is the right-hand picture. There's another thing. I have 3 sons, again, 9, 12, and 14, and they are the first generation ever in human history that has all the information that has ever been in their pocket. They carry all the information that has ever been with them, and they know how to access it. So the question is, what is needed for these children to be able to function in 2032? Interestingly, when the book printing was discovered in Germany, in Mainz, Germany, I think it was, there was an uprising of parents, because what was very important for children is to have all the information in their heads. And books were very dangerous, because then the information would be in the books and no longer in the heads of the children. So there was strong resistance of parents, from parents towards books. And we see the same next step, basically. The information is readily available. So the question is, would we prepare our children to have all the information in their heads or in books, or should we prepare them to be able to find and to filter and to apply information? That, I think, is a new skill. I was doing a presentation for students, and I think the information that you're gathering here, there were economy students, the information is not going to make the difference. Your personality is going to be making the difference. The way that you are able, as a person, to find, filter, and apply information is going to be the difference. So, if you look at the basic principles of our school system, the main one is we don't have year classes anymore. So we don't say there are 30 children at the age of 6 and 7 in one class. We divide the school by learning progression. And that means that each child has a totally and strictly individualized learning path. An example is that we have a workshop clock reading on how to learn to read a clock, very important. That is offered to a child when it's ready. to learn to read the clock, and only to a group of children that are ready and at that level. It's not offered to children that already know how to read a clock. So that means that despite age or intellectual progression, things are offered when a child is ready. A couple of things. Basically, a child, by evolution, is designed to learn. It is curious, it has the capacity to learn, specifically young children. It's designed to learn. So if we trust the child with its own capacity to learn, you create a different angle from, you know, delivering content to a child. Each child has a talent, and it's often heard. But when you go to your school and say, my daughter has a talent of computer programming, and the school says, oh, well, that's great, but we can't do that. We can do math and we can language. Or my son has a talent for ballet, then the school wouldn't be able to deal with that. So if you design a system where the talent, and the lady before me was talking about the talents and interests of the teachers, which are extremely interesting and important to flower. But if you start from the starting point of talents of children, something happens. 21st century skills. Again, no year classes. What we do have, and maybe I can explain the daily routine. I have 5 minutes left, wow. The daily routine, our schools are open from 8 to 6. And you can come into the school at, you have to be there at 9:30, and then the school starts with a STEM group, which is a group of children age 3 age levels, like Montessori. You start, you do the birthdays and that type of thing. After that, during the day, each child has an own individual path. So one boy will go to math, another will go to language and so forth. And then at the end of the day, the STEM group comes together again and meets and rounds up the day. We don't have classrooms, we have ateliers. So the traditional classroom are now changed into, for example, math ateliers, and that workshops are given there. So in the math atelier, there's a workshop multiplying for children who are ready to now be taught multiplying. And then what we've done, we've separated the teaching from the practicing. So there's a silent square in the school where children go and they work individually and independently, and they sit there and do their practicing. And that means that the teaching is done from one teacher to about 9 children. So there's one teacher with 9 children, all at the same level. They're all ready to read the clock, and there's one teacher explaining how to read the clock to 9 children. So there's great effectivity in that teaching method. Everybody has an iPad also at home. And one of the great things about that is that in social poorer areas, also parents are now learning how to read and to calculate. I will move very strongly, very fast. So we have a virtual school on the iPad. They have a schedule that is based on the following, and I have to really speed up. Every 6 weeks, there's a meeting with a parent, the child, and the teacher. And they go through the progress of the last 6 weeks. How did it go? Math is doing very well, but your multiplication is doing a little weak. And then we design the coming next 6 weeks based on that analysis. So if multiplication is a little weak, the child is offered a little more multiplication. Or maybe he's doing really well in language, then we say you don't need to do language the coming 6 weeks. Let's focus a little more on another topic. So in the 6 weeks meetings, we design the specific program for the child in the coming weeks. We work virtually, totally with learning apps. And that also means that we don't do testing anymore, because we know exactly where a child is. We can follow a child individually and say, on this sum, he ran into a problem, and then we can help him solve that problem. So we don't need, you know, the 3 months testing process anymore. This is what I said about the physical school. So we have the silent square, and this is all a traditional building. So there's not big refurbishing done or anything. You can use a traditional building. And we have the traditional classrooms changed into ateliers. I think, the biggest difference is not for the children. They love it and they're very happy. The biggest difference is for the teacher, because you're not teaching a child anymore, but you're coaching a child. You're sitting next to the child and you help and support him or her in the learning process. And that is, a big change psychologically, as my predecessor also spoke about, but it also makes that you are master of your own domain. You can, and I'll give a small example of a guy that had to explain the vowel to children. And he said, I will not explain the vowel to you. You go away in groups of 3, and you find out on the internet what the vowel is. Then you come back and you do a presentation for the rest of the class and explain the vowel. So this teacher was able to design his own form and method for explaining, having children learn how to use the vowel. And of course, within 1 hour, every child knew what a vowel was. It was a great way of transferring information. I'm going very quickly. This is the silent square I explained. If you cut up the day, then all of a sudden you have half-hour sessions, and you can do math, you can do language, but you can also do yoga, or you can do violin lessons for talented violin players or anything. You can have parents come in and do, as you said, you know, for example, creative sessions or so forth. So you have a much broader way of delivering and offering information. I'm going through that. This is the process meeting. Minimal requirements. It's not that big because I want to with something that we did not anticipate on. Because if each child, by definition, no child does anything that he or she is not ready for. No child, by definition, does anything that he or she already knows. And I think we all know children, you know, that are very smart and already know how to think, but we still have to teach them. So that means that each child is in its own comfort zone of learning. That is really interesting psychologically. So a couple of things happen. First of all, Marek and Jan would, I think, agree. If you come to our school in Amsterdam, you'll see very happy children. They are extremely happy. They're comfortable, they're happy, and so forth. But there's something else. We do not have attention disorder in our schools. We don't have it. It's gone. It's gone. We had a boy that was at home for 4 years because he was not allowed anymore in any school. He came to our school. Within 3 weeks, he was doing extremely well because the children are in their own comfort zone of learning. So they have the capacity to enjoy. They're not being put into a system. They're enjoying and being able to work with their own personal curiosity. My time is gone, so that's it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, John. I need to ask you one question, because I mean, you said you're growing. You said like last year with those 20 schools, now going to be 40. This is amazing to me, because what is the secret that such a beautiful concept, but very demanding, when Eva Radanowicz talked about her contacting other schools, there weren't that many. I mean, can you tell us what's the secret that it's possible, or how much time do you need to implement your system in a school which is ready, and what does it mean that it is ready?
We always say that we need about 80% of the teachers to support the system.
Okay.
And then we go ahead and do it. Then we need about 4 to 6 months to install it. It's not that big a deal. It's just a change of psychology more than anything else. What is more interesting is how is it possible that with such a revolutionary idea, basically, we had our school started, our own school in Amsterdam started in August with 45 children, and they're now up to 90 children. So that means that 50 parents and children have decided to leave their own and come here, which is extraordinary. Bottom line is, this is much better education than traditional. It's just a lot better. We have one school in Friesland who started with 60 and they're now at 160 students. They're drawing away students from all the schools in the area because it's just a great school.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom.